The Business of Art, brought to you by the Video Department.
I always think of like the SNL skit when they're like talking about baking and they're like, we just made a apple pie.
Yes, is that the Sweaty Balls episode?
Yeah.
So funny story, my mother-in-law does themed Halloween parties.
Uh-huh.
And last year it was SNL themed.
Oh, really?
And my wife's grandparents came as the Sweaty Balls.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
It was so funny.
That's an incredible, like for Halloween.
Yes.
Wow, that's an awesome idea. There's so many characters to choose from.
It was great.
I probably would come in as like, what is the cheerleaders?
Yes.
Yeah, oh my God.
That was my my sister-in-law and her partner were the cheerleaders.
Yeah.
I was Will Ferrell as Robert Goulet.
Oh, nice. Yes. There's so many.
There's so many.
The Coneheads, I love when they're all in black, the whole like bossy thing, or the Chippendales. with Farley.
Nobody came as the
that.
Chippendales. My wife was Mary Catherine Gallagher or whatever.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you know my wife at all, that's the perfect role for her.
Yeah.
So we're here with Miguel Perez. Miguel is the founding artistic director of Conflux Dance Theater. Is that the official Conflux Dance Theater?
Conflux Dance Theater is the official title.
Perfect.
Yeah, you got it. You got it right.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And Miguel and I first met during what ended up being, through no one directly's fault, a very traumatic experience, which was we're trying to avoid the C word. It was a pandemic virtual musical version of Fame.
Which is already hard enough, but they made it harder for us, right?
Yes.
But I feel like that's how we bonded, because
we definitely bonded.
I felt like we kept looking at each other like, is this really happening? Like,
we definitely, I mean, and to be fair, as I sort of prefaced, to be fair, like no one knew what we were doing in that moment in the world.
Yeah.
No one knew.
Yeah.
But basically, that process was, so we filmed dances with masks. It's spaced out.
Yes.
But then all of the scenes were individually on Zoom.
On Zoom, yeah. And then we had to put like certain actors by themselves in a room when they sang. And then they kept having to swap. Yeah, it was super interesting. I learned a lot. For sure. I don't think I've ever filmed anything like that before. So
and
I was like, it could
won't.
hopefully we don't. But I was like, it could only get easier from that. I mean, like when someone tells you to choreograph something and they're like, they can't touch each other. They can't have to be 10 feet apart. They have to stay in a box. Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Right. I forgot like that. There was like, you can't do like unit movements.
No. Yeah. It was very structured. And I felt like even we had some good ideas how to fix it, and we got shut down a bit. So
do you know what it reminds me of now though?
Yeah.
It was like early TikTok dancing.
Totally. Yeah.
Like that was like what I didn't realize it at the time, because that was kind of when that was blowing up, I think. So unless we were like,
wow, to think we could have been like multimillionaires by now, we would have like stuck to it, you know. My husband was actually talking, was like, maybe you should be a TikTok star, because we have a friend of ours who their next door neighbor cooks like in a small kitchen. She's got like 5 million followers. She gets paid to cook, and I'm like, can I get paid just to like teach dance? Is that a thing I could do?
Yeah.
But I feel it's a lot of work.
It is a thing. It is a lot of work, and I think specifically for dance, you'd have to have like a cool looking space.
Yes. Yeah. I've been trying to do stuff outdoors. So now I'm in the woods. So I have this like cool setting, and like maybe in the fall when the leaves are falling, you know, like, or even just a project. Like I've always wanted to do like a movie as well.
Yeah.
Maybe something that we can talk about,
a
project in the future, but like some sort of film, you know, where there's dancing, you know, like, and we have a lot of space. So who knows, maybe an idea for that.
Yeah. Well, let's go back.
Yeah.
Start me at the beginning. Where did you grow up? Where'd you go to school?
So I grew up in Tucson, Arizona. I went to the University of Arizona. I lived in Tucson for about 20 years before I moved to Chicago.
Okay.
So I was going to school for dance, which was a big surprise to me because I didn't dance growing up until maybe the age of 15, and I started doing Mexican folklore, more traditional dancing. You know, I come from a very like machismo Catholic upbringing, and dancing wasn't a thing that guys did you know. So my dad wanted me to play soccer and all these things, and I always joke around that I could kick the ball and I could run really fast, but I just couldn't do both together. So so I just started dancing, and this guy from the University of Arizona was getting his master's degree, and he's like, you should think about maybe going to the U of A for dance. And I was like, that's a thing? Like, there's a dance program? And he's like, yeah. He's like, I think you could get in. So with his advice, it was my senior year in high school, and I took a dance class at the University of Arizona, and I was obsessed. Like, I loved it. Like, I took it twice a week. I would stick around when there were rehearsals. I was like a fly on the wall. My teachers still joke around that they're like that I never wanted to leave. I just was so obsessed with this style of dance that I had never done before. But after that year, they offered me a 4-year scholarship to college, which is amazing because my parents couldn't afford it, you know, so they kind of gave me like that stepping stone for my career. And then after college, I moved to Chicago. And that was nice because I knew I had a job once I left college, because I knew a lot of my friends didn't. So
what job was that?
I danced for River North Chicago Dance Company. So it's this jazz company that's no longer around. So it's one of the few companies that I got to dance with. So
And it was called River North?
River North Chicago Dance Company. So I've got to dance professionally for about 3 companies. River North Chicago Dance Company, Harbor Street 2, also out of Chicago, and then another company called Body Traffic that are based out of LA, and they're actually like blowing up. They're all over now. And when I was there was 3 of us when we first started, and then it was a group of 6. But that was an incredible time. Like, I loved it. But I've had a really diverse background. I've gotten to do a lot of different things. So I was really fortunate, you know.
Take me back to so were you in high school when that graduate student and you had that connection?
Yes. Yeah. So what happened was, we were doing our Mexican folklore show, and we tried to branch out. So we were doing like the history of Mexico, but we also started doing the history of Arizona. So that included swing dances, country line dancing, a bunch of different things that reference Tucson. And he came in to help us do a Santana song, like a more jazz, and we didn't know what that was, but he saw something in me. He saw some potential, and that's when he was like, maybe you should think about going. You know, they're always looking for guys. And that was kind of like the catalyst before I went to school. And when I was a senior in high school, I would go back and forth taking dance classes, and nobody knew what I was doing. I was like, yeah, I'm going to work. And then I would go take some dance classes.
Even your family?
My family knew, but none of my friends. You know, I kept that a secret.
Sure.
So, yeah.
What was the Mexican heritage? Was that through the school or a church?
That was it started at a church, and then it became its own entity. And I had cousins who were in it before, and so that's kind of how the draw was for me. And I took a few classes, and then I loved it. And again, it was something that like I put my whole heart into, and then I started choreographing for them, and I started teaching classes. And so I love, though, when we expanded, not just doing Mexican folklore, because it introduced me to so many different styles of dance.
Were you teaching those classes before you had started going to school?
Before I was in college?
Yeah.
Yes, I did. Yeah. So I think, now I'm choreographing and doing things like that, but I was doing that as a kid.
Without real formal training?
Without real formal training.
Wow.
I think I even remember getting my cousins together and putting shows and stuff like that. So I think I've been doing it my whole life.
Yeah.
So
that's so many like filmmakers' story with the camera, like doing movies. That's so cool that you're able to do that.
Exactly. So.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't even know, because my background other than film is theater, and I just didn't even know that theater really existed when I was growing up. Yeah. So it's great that you had that, and specifically through like a cultural community thing. That's really special. What a great opportunity. Yeah,
I think, I'm so lucky because I feel like my life could have gone so many different directions, like I think I was hanging out with the wrong people at a certain time, but like dance, I was so obsessed with dance that I was so focused, and I was like, okay, once I'm in it, like this is something that I wanted to do. So I like put all my energy into that, and that gave me my first job. I moved from Tucson, Arizona, from small little town to Chicago, which was like, from 113-degree weather to -20 in the first year. It was all a big shock, but I was loving every second of it. Living with 3 people in a studio, making like a few $100s a week, but I was like, I love it. I love dance. I love art, so yeah. It's nice. It's nice when you can just focus on your passion.
Yeah. And you were like 23, 24 when you were in Chicago.
Yeah.
Primo years to be in a big city like that.
Yeah, exactly.
What an adventure. Did you, before you realized that you could have a career in this, was there any other thoughts like what you were going to do?
I'm a marine biologist, but it's so funny because I love the ocean, but I don't love getting in it. So I was like, that's not going to work out really, really well. But or something to do with animals, or you know. But yeah, once the dance bug hit me, I was like, that's it.
Yeah,
I couldn't see my. Even now, you know, people ask me like, what else would you do? And I was like, I don't know. I think art, anything that has to do with dance, whether it's teaching or, you know, so running a company, things like that. So,
what was your family's reaction?
It was really interesting because, again, you know, I was saying like my father, especially, you know, they were like dance, they weren't sure. And then they saw like one of my first performances in college. And they're like, oh, you're pretty good. Like, you're a natural at it. To when like my last performance in college where my dad was like in tears, you know, that was just a whole like cycle. Like, it was nice to see them. And now they're like my biggest fans, you know, like they've gotten to see all of my shows. When I was touring, they got to see me, you know, so yeah, it was great. I mean, I'm also glad that I could do it well, you know, because if I sucked, that would have been a different story. They're like, maybe you want to try something different. But I think just getting the push from my my professors, them talking to my parents. I remember that last show, they were like, you know, your son can do this professionally, you know, you just got to believe in him. And yeah, and just to see his face and his big smile and how proud he was of me it was touching. So.
And so that was all in Arizona.
That was all in Arizona.
And so you go to Chicago.
Yes.
You have a job lined up.
I do.
Are you doing other side gigs to pay the bills?
Of course, yes, because I mean, as much as I love top ramen and peanut butter sandwiches every day, I was like, I need to make some money. And what's funny is that the company stuff, even though I love what I was doing, didn't pay as much as all the side gigs. Like, I was working for these companies that would do parties or events. I was dancing for drag queens. I was doing shows on the weekends. I mean, anything that had to do with dance. Again, I was also very fortunate that I didn't have to do anything else but dance, even in the jobs that I was doing on the side. But yeah, that's how I supplemented my income by doing all these things on the weekend. And then I could, you know, also we saved money when we were living with 3 people in a room probably this size. Like, literally I was in bed and I could like reach for the kitchen and cook breakfast. Like, that's how tiny it was. But again, we were so happy to be with a company. We felt so lucky and blessed. And I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. So.
How long were you in Chicago?
6 years. So I danced with 2 companies there. I went River North for about 4 years. I moved to a different company called Hubbard Street for about a year. And then I went back to River North. And then after that, like, I've always wanted to be a dancer that not was just stuck in a box. Like, I just didn't want to do concert work. I knew there was now like commercial dance and things like that. So I wanted to maybe do TV work or dance with a background for an artist, things like that. So that's where my mind was saying. After 6 years, I was like, okay, let me try something different.
Did you go down that road to talk about that journey?
Yeah. So the last year I was with River North, there was an audition that I saw for Celine Dion in Las Vegas. And this was something that I was nervous about. I told my sister, you know, I was like, should I go? And then, you know, so we knew that the audition was happening. And then as it got close, I was like, you know, I'm not going. And my sister was like, no, you're going to go. And her best friend, we got in a car. We drove up one day, auditioned, and then drove back the next.
From Chicago?
From Tucson, Arizona.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so that's where my family is still. So gotcha. I went to go visit them for the holidays, and then we decided to drive up.
That's a much better drive.
Yeah, much better. Yeah, 8 hours versus like 3 days, you know. So, but yeah, I thought the audition went really well. I felt really good about it, but you just never know. There was hundreds of guys there, and so that. You know, that happened. I went back to Chicago to dance. And then like a month later, I get a call from the Celine team saying that they want to hire me if I'm available. And of course, it's probably like the best job ever that's ever happened to me. And sadly, I had to say no, just because I had already committed to this company. I was making like a few $100s as opposed to maybe, you know, tens of thousands of dollars. But I've also believed like I never want to burn any bridges, and I committed, and I was doing solos, and we're going into our last performances, so I couldn't just leave them hanging. So I talked to the Celine people, and I was like, listen, I'm so grateful. Thank you for hiring me. I just can't do it right now, but if there's a possibility ever that you still need a dancer, please let me know. And I think they loved that response. So a few months later, I feel like I was in my last month of Chicago, not knowing what I was going to do. I was going to buy a plane ticket to LA. I get a call. and they're like, well, we still have a position available if you want. And, you know, of course I'm like tears, crying. I was like, I can't believe this. I can't believe I'm going to fulfill another one of my dreams. And so as soon as I was done in Chicago, I knew I had a job in Las Vegas. So I picked up everything and drove to Vegas, you know, moved all my stuff.
You did drive to Vegas.
I did drive to Vegas. Yeah. I've done quite a cross country moves, you know, because of my job. But yeah, it was exciting to just be on a stage with 50 dancers. I have to say that job with Celine has probably been the greatest job ever, just because of the amount of pay, the vacation, how they took care of us, the amount of dancers. There was 50 total dancers, 25 guys, 25 girls. The artists, I mean, we're dancing for Celine Dion.
This was a residency?
You know, this was a residency in Vegas.
Yeah.
So yeah, just amazing. I was there for about 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah. What
years were they?
That was 2004 to 2006, I believe.
I didn't realize that she was doing it. I mean, she's like the OG in terms of like super pop stars doing residencies.
So when other people didn't want to do it, she took a chance. There was a guy who used to work with Cirque du Soleil who started, Franco Dragon, who started his own company. And I think she went to go see a show called O. Yeah, she loved it.
I've seen O.
Yeah, and it's a fantastic show. And she's like, wants to do something like that. So they partnered together. I mean, they built the Coliseum for her.
Right.
So yeah, she was the star. And now you see there's so many artists, but she was the one, you know, who decided to take that chance.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Was that at Caesars?
That was at Caesars Palace.
Where did you live while you were there?
I lived in like Summerlin area. So it's like the outskirts, which is always funny because when I was living in Vegas, and I've lived there off and on for 10 years since then, people are like, what is there to do? I was like, I don't know. I do my job and then I leave.
Yeah.
You know, it's one of those things when you're in the industry and you're working on the Strip, you know, it could be a lot.
Yeah.
So, but it was great. We all had homes. We had like little cookouts, things like that. But it felt like a place to live, not just like a place where people visit and just do whatever they want to do.
For sure.
You
yeah.
know?
No, I've spent a lot of time in Vegas for a lot of different reasons. I've worked there a bunch. It is definitely, I mean, now like everyone from LA is like migrating there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Because it's like a place where you can really live, you know, and Henderson is really nice and growing. Exactly. And Vegas is always growing.
Yeah.
I mean,
and it's been like for dancers or for artists who want like contracts, you know, stability. It's a great place. I was so fortunate when we were there. I feel like there was like 7 or 8 dance shows, like from Lion King to all these other productions. So there's so many artists, you know, while you can live in LA and it's like gig work, which is really nice, but you don't get that consistent paycheck. Here, I knew like you had insurance, you had everything, which is a big draw, you know. So, you know, I loved it. I loved my time there.
Yeah. I mean, I got to think that Las Vegas is probably the number 2 or 3 city in the country for employing dancers.
Yeah.
New York's got to be one.
Yeah, New York, LA, but I would say Las Vegas is up there, especially for stability.
Yeah, exactly. Like LA, exactly. It's more like one-off contract things.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm sure there's ballet companies, but not the professional performing arts is not, there's not like a bunch of prominent resident companies in LA. The same way that, I mean, like I feel like the DC resident companies of performing arts are more prominent nationally than Los Angeles.
I would say it's grown a lot since living in LA and living in Vegas. Now there's like a few contemporary companies in Vegas. There's a ballet company in Vegas. LA has a lot of smaller companies.
Yeah.
You know, which a lot of dancers dance. But that was a big difference because LA had been known as commercial dance. And when we say commercial dance, it's backup TV stuff, movies. Right. That's what we consider commercial versus concert, which is more the company stuff that tours and does performances, stuff like that. So.
And like I'm sure in any industry, the commercial stuff pays the bills much more in higher. You get much more pay for your time when you're doing commercial stuff.
Yes, depending on the job that you do, but for sure, like when I lived in LA. I was dancing with Body Traffic, and anytime there was a lull in our contract, I would do a bunch of commercial stuff. So I would be doing an award show or things like that, which is great. Like you're saying, you get a big check, but then what happens next? Like you can get a great job, but then you're also unemployed for maybe 2 months until another audition happening. So in a way, they all work out the same because at least in a company, you're making a small amount, but it's like every week.
Right.
Versus one job, and I'm like, okay, I have all these bills, and then all you're doing is paying those bills with that one job and then waiting for the next. But unless you get like a commercial that you just sit back, you film it, and then you're just getting money,
Right.
you know, or a movie or a tour. Like that's the dream, right? That's what you want to be doing.
Did you ever pursue any tours?
I did. So once the Las Vegas residency closed down for Celine, there was an opportunity for all 50 of us to have our own audition because she was getting ready to do a tour. And here I was the newest hire from everybody else. So I was like, I have the least amount of chance to get this job. And then there was another audition for anyone else, all LA, anyone could fly in from all over the world to audition. And I decided to go to that audition because if I was going to move to LA, I kind of needed to size my competition up and see what I needed to work on. So I went to that audition and we did like ballet, hip hop, contemporary, and they threw everything at us because it was going to be a residency of like 7 or 8 different choreographers and it was going to tour the world. And so I did that audition, and after that, the director came up with me. He's like, "You did a great job." And so that doesn't mean you have a job. I just felt really good about it. At least he acknowledged me. Then there was that second audition for the Celine dancers, and I decided to go to that too. And everyone's like, "You're going to go to that?" I was like, "I really want this job. Yeah, I'm going to go." And I ended up helping other dancers with choreography, and I think the director liked the fact that I was willing to come again. So yeah, the Celine show in Vegas was about to close, and again, no one knew what they were going to do. And I was about to move to LA again. I don't know, somehow I was like, every time I buy a plane ticket to LA, something else happens. And I got a call that I was one out of 4. There were 4 male dancers and 4 female dancers, and I got that job. And there were only 2 of us from the original Vegas show that got that job. Everybody else was new. And at that audition, there was probably like 1,000 guys and probably like a few thousand girls. So I did something right. You know, everybody was a different look, so maybe that also had to do with, you know, maybe me Latin or whatever. But yeah, I was very fortunate, you know.
And how long did you do that job?
That was for about 1.5 years, and we toured all over the world. And again, this little kid from Tucson, you know, with a dream, getting to travel all over the world on like first class, nice hotels,
nice accommodations,
a really nice paycheck,
Mm-hmm.
and I was also dance captain, so I got a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And getting to perform. I mean, our first show was, I think, where they held the World Cup in South Africa,
Mm-hmm.
for 60,000 people. Like, I've never experienced
Mm-hmm.
anything like that. To like walk on stage and to see, I mean, you couldn't even see how many people there were. You just see lights, but the energy, you know, that it was so palpable, like to feel them. And of course, they're coming for her.
Yeah.
But they also really appreciate the show that you're giving as well. I mean, that energy was just insane. I'm like, so there were times that I was exhausted, but it goes away like that when people are just screaming and, you know, they're just so happy to see you. And it was probably the best job I've ever had in my whole life.
Did you have much interaction with Celine?
We did. So I was also fortunate because since I knew her from Vegas, they thought, well, we have this, you know, kind of relationship. So a lot of the time I was walking her around. I was really close to her throughout the show. Mm-hmm. And full story, talking about this Mexican folklore, is that there was a piece that she was wearing these pants with like a skirt that was supposed to come off. And then it was a cape. And they were asking us, like, could anyone do anything with this cape? And I was like, being all shy, like, I didn't know. Going back to when I was like 16, learning Mexican folklore and flamenco, we did a lot of cape work. So I was like, you mean like this? And then I full on did a whole dance. They're like, yeah, that's exactly what we want. And I got to choreograph a lot of it. And then I had a whole duet with her, just her and I on stage. And again, I never would have thought that, you know, the style that I was dancing when I was 15, these traditional dances, would come years later and dance with Celine Dion. Yeah, it was pretty amazing to put all that together.
Totally makes sense. Totally makes sense to me.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Did you have any like favorite cities that you visited?
I feel like Amsterdam, Canada, I mean like Paris. Some of these were great also because what I loved about her is that she sang live all the time. So she couldn't do 5 shows or 6 shows in a row.
Right.
So there'd be places that we would have time off. And there are places like Paris that they love her. So she did like almost like a week of shows spread out in like 3 weeks. So we really got to feel like a home, like, you know, like not just in a hotel and then leaving. So I got to explore a lot. I mean, but again, everything, I was just amazed by everything. You know, I feel like you should be, you know, you can be book smart, but when you travel, that changes you completely. Yeah. And I just came back a different person experiencing all these things. Yeah. You know, all these people, all these cultures, you know.
Changes your perspective on your own culture.
Oh,
when you
exactly.
Spend time with other people's culture.
Exactly, for sure.
You spent time in Asia?
We did. Yeah. Hong Kong. We were supposed to go to where the Olympics were being held, but she ended up getting sick, so we actually got to be sent back. But yeah, we got to explore a lot, through Europe, through Mexico, through Canada, through Asia.
How many shows a week? Well, what's the most you would do per week?
Maybe 4.
Yeah.
Especially if we were in a city for a while.
Right.
But sometimes
every other night, basically.
Yeah, or sometimes in a row, depending on how they. Because then maybe we did a few shows a week, and then we'd have a few days off.
Yeah.
But also, if we were traveling, there was like 14 or so semi trucks carrying this stage wherever. So we also had to have time off in order for them to get to that next destination. So it all just depended.
Yeah, how does that work?
And sometimes there'd be 2. There'd be like one being set up and another one depending on one in the U.S., one overseas.
Yeah, because if you got to ship it over there, wow.
Yeah.
What
all this logistics.
Those tours are crazy.
Yeah.
Those tours are crazy. We just went. Our friend Jonathan, guest of the pod, is in the Clue National Tour right now. We just went up to the Kennedy Center to see that. It was very good. It's a new production, new-ish production. But he was very good. He's playing Professor Plum.
Oh, nice.
And they're in D.C. for 3 weeks.
Okay.
Which is so nice.
Yeah, which is great.
Yeah.
And then sometimes there's perks where like they'll give you a stipend and then you can either like figure out what you do with it, so you get to save a little bit of money if you're smart. Of course, when you're traveling the world for the first time, you're not smart and you're spending all your money because you're like, when am I ever going to be here again? So, but got to see a lot. Lessons learned. Yeah.
So what was after that?
So after that, then I did move to LA.
Finally,
I made it because now I'm like, I've worked with all of these amazing choreographers. So I was like, I have an in with these choreographers in LA. So I knew I could work with them in the future. But I also still missed the company setting. I miss being in a studio, creating work, building on something. Because a lot of the time when you're doing commercial work, you learn something and it goes away. But here, you get to marinate, you get to really work on this material and you're performing. And then those are great because when the audience comes sees you, it's really about you. It's not you and the artist, which they're really coming to see first, and then they appreciate you, so they were both rewarding, but I was also glad that I could go back and forth. So while I was working with Body Traffic, I was doing stuff like So You Think and Dance, Dancing with the Stars, filmed a few movies, some commercials, and then was also doing some shows in Vegas. So of course, Vegas always drew me back. I danced for Shania Twain there. I did Cirque du Soleil.
What shows?
The Elvis show. So it was all Elvis Presley.
I saw the Elvis show, yeah.
Oh, I wonder if it was before. It had been around maybe a year before I joined, so maybe.
What year were you in doing that?
That was like 2009, 10? I feel like it was closely after I got done with Celine, maybe like a few years later.
Okay,
that,
yeah.
So.
I would have seen. I think I saw it right towards the end of its run.
Okay, and that might have been after I left.
Yeah.
Because again, I knew that show was ending, and so I wanted to make sure that I was ready to audition for other work. But yeah, and then I think I danced for Donnie and Marie Osmond. So
classic.
Yeah, that was a trip.
Rite of passage.
Yeah, especially for like all my parents, my grandparents, all these people who watched, and I was like, yeah, I'm dancing. Which they were great, amazing people to work with. And then I did a show called Showstoppers at the Wynn, which was all like the best of Broadway musical things.
Yeah.
So I've definitely have an eclectic resume that I've been very fortunate to.
The Wynn is like right now one of the most successful, if not the most successful hotel in Vegas.
Yeah.
Which I think is interesting because it's sort of off the beaten path a little bit.
Yeah, I mean it's a beautiful hotel.
Yeah, it's the nice one.
It's a nice one. Yeah, they did a really good job with it. So
you sort of blasted right through like the Dancing with the Stars and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, so I did some like guesting. So for Leona Lewis, I got to dance for her. At the age of 30, I auditioned for So You Think You Can Dance, and I was something that I just wanted to do. I was like, okay, well, this is my last shot. Let me do it. And I had the goal of like, I want to be a teacher, and I know how a lot of people can use that as a platform to then like find other work. So I did it, and I made it all the way to the top 30, but I didn't make it on the show. And it's a reality show, so a lot of factors are there. I didn't have a story. I didn't have a dramatic story. I also worked with a lot of those choreographers from that show, so there could have been something like that. They don't give you the answer of why you didn't make it. I just didn't. But I think it all turned out for the best. I was also really, really nervous that I was going to be on TV performing, and I don't know. I just, it just didn't sit right. So I'm glad it all kind of worked out, and I still continue to work in LA, so it didn't stop me. Just something that I wanted to try. I feel like I've had these goals in my life, and I've been really lucky to kind of achieve most of them.
Were you on Were you on TV with Dancing with the Stars with Leona Lewis?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was like guest performances that would happen. So they always bring artists. And that's how I worked for like, So You Think You Dance. And later on I came in with another art, stuff like that throughout. So.
And how did you end up in old RVA?
So it's funny because I performed with Body Traffic here. And so that was my introduction. We danced at a festival here. And I just remember being like, what a quaint city. I love it.
What festival was it?
It was just a few companies got together. Shu Chin, who has a company in, I think it's Jin Dance in DC.
Okay.
And I don't know if she was like the host, but we came down and performed together. And, I just remember going downtown and the cobblestone streets. And of course, everything's so green. I grew up in the desert. And so I was just like, what is this place? Not knowing that 6 years later I would have moved here, and so I ended up meeting my partner. We are the Tinder couple that met online. So we did long distance for a long time. I met him when I was in DC and he was living in Virginia. But yeah, after dating for a year and a half, we had been chatting for a few months, I decided to come visit, and I loved it. I thought this is a great city for the arts. I knew there was a lot of colleges that had dance programs or studios. So we had talked about back and forth if he was going to move to Vegas or I was going to move here. And one day I just was like, I think I'm ready to leave Vegas. I'm going to move to Richmond. He's like, are you sure? And I was like, yeah. I was like, I feel like I can make a living there. And thank God that happened, because then a year later COVID hit and Vegas was a ghost town. Like I had so many of my friends lose jobs. Like, they were forced to retire. And here I could still work in Richmond, so I don't know, maybe there was like someone looking over me and was like, no, this is where you need to be. And I've loved it. I've gotten to teach at most of the universities here in town, at a lot of the studios. And now I have my own company, so a lot of work, but it's been great.
What was your first opportunity professionally when you came to Richmond?
I believe I taught some guest classes at VCU and U of R.
Okay.
And yeah, just kind of getting in there. And then I found this studio and I just taught there for a bit while I was trying to get my footing around. And, now I go all over Virginia. Like I've been to George Mason. I was just a visiting professor at James Madison University, in talks with I've taught at Shenandoah, but maybe something more. So it's a great opportunity. Plus there's North Carolina, Philly. We're just in a great location with a lot of art.
So. Oh yeah. The triangle of North Carolina is closer than Shenandoah.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's the best colleges in the world there,
exactly.
Pretty much. Honestly, all of the best colleges in the world are within 3 hours of Virginia, because you've got everything in DC. You've got UVA, obviously, and then you've got... Yeah, we're pretty lucky.
Yeah.
And we get the beach.
You get the beach. And then, New York is only 6 hours away as well. So it's if you want to go up there for a weekend for an audition, you can do it.
Philly.
So, yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, and Madison's also been on the pod.
Oh,
so
great.
I know that Conflux has done some collaborations with West End Academy of Dance.
Yeah, so Madison and I met a few years ago, and I did a guest class for her when they were at a different studio. And my goal had always been not to just be in one place. I love teaching. I've had such a great career, so I've always wanted to pay it forward, especially to young dancers. So I wanted to teach all this experience that I've had, and that's why I wanted to teach at multiple studios. So her and I had a conversation, and she's like, "Would you like to teach for us?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I've loved it. She's been such a great boss, but also a friend, very encouraging about the company. She gives us free space, which is one of the hardest things for a dance company to do, is to find a place to call home. So yeah, it's been great. We partnered with West End. We have a few apprentices now, especially dancers who want to take this to the next level. We give them the opportunity to feel what it's like to be with a company, to get the resume, to get footage, so like a stepping stone for them as well. So.
And so talk to me about the origin of Conflux.
Yeah. So now that I was living in Richmond for a while, I saw ballet companies and I saw modern companies, but I didn't see a contemporary company, especially the stuff that I used to do. And so I felt like there was a void. There's a lot of great companies, but I was like, okay, can I add my voice to this conversation? And so I had this idea. I was like, I just want to do it. I want to do it, but I was nervous. And finally in 2019, I finally was like, okay, let me start this company. Let me at least start the process. So we met with some lawyers, got all the paperwork, and then COVID hit. And then I was like,
what a great time to start a
I was like,
company.
what a great way to start a company. So I'm glad we just had the paperwork and didn't invest much into it. But then COVID hit. A year later, things were starting to get back to normal, and I was like, okay, I think I'm ready to pursue that. So with a friend of mine, we just decided, okay, let's put this company together. Let's have an audition and see who comes. And our first audition, we had all of these amazing dancers, you know, that just wanted something different. The thing about Richmond is there's a lot of talent, but most people have to leave the city in order to find work. So I wanted to make sure, like, maybe we could have a company here where then people could stay. And I also felt that there were a lot of artists here who came from, whether they're partners or for jobs, and they still wanted to dance. They just didn't find a company that they loved. And so, yeah, we started, and now we're 3 years in. And yeah, we got our nonprofit status. We have like a board now. We have like 3 shows under our belt. We've done a lot of different things around the city. And our goal, like part of our mission was always to elevate the level of dance here in Richmond. So I feel like we're doing that. We want to do stuff with our community, especially collaborate. So we've done stuff with River City Taiko with different artists. And now we're working on something for the youth, like especially unrepresented communities. And so now we're in talks, like I'm going to have a meeting with Side by Side and maybe Spark, maybe working with UMFS as well, and see how through dance we can help them, you know, like find an outlet, you know, especially now you see there's a lot of kids, I mean adults with a lot of like mental health, things like that. And so I feel like art is essential. I feel like they need an outlet, whether they're singing, drawing, theater, whatever it is. But if we can give them this space, and I mean, you know that art is always the first thing to go, you know, so it's like, let's implement this. Let's start these programs, and maybe we create new artists. Maybe they're inspired. Maybe they become dancers. Maybe they don't. Maybe they become patrons. I mean, I think we'll all benefit from it as a society as a whole. So.
Well, that's really awesome. And I mean, you just talked a little bit about this, but what are so you sort of talked about plans for maybe the next 2 to 5 years. What are your plans for like 10 years out? Have you thought about that?
Yeah. So I mean, that's the thing about, you always have to think ahead, you know, like you can never rest. Like we do one show and I would love to be like, we did it. That was amazing. But it's like, okay, what's the next thing that's happening? And so that's something that's always in the back of my mind. And I would like to see, Conflux like as a staple of Richmond, and we are now getting more well known. Like some of our first shows, people comparing us to like Richmond Ballet, which is huge, and I'm like, that's very kind. I mean, they've been around for 40 years, but thank you for at least thinking of us and, you know, putting us with that group. But yeah, I would like to tour, to do more things around the community. I love the fact that we're hiring local dancers, we're doing stuff with local artists, and I just want to do more of that with more impact, like I was saying, with a younger generation as well. So hopefully we can continue doing this. I mean, I know running a nonprofit dance company is not the easiest, and the first few years, you know, it's a lot of sweat and tears, a lot of stress, but hopefully it all will lead to something bigger. And the more people see us and they see the level of talent that's in our company and the repertoire that we're bringing along with, you know, paying it forward, I think it's a great mission that people want to get behind. So I feel like we'll be successful.
Yeah. That's an incredible. Is there any like Richmond dance league or like where the dance companies get together? Is there anything like that?
There was a dance festival that Dogtown used to do,
Yeah.
and when the theater got sold, that kind of shut down a little bit, but they are actually trying to raise the money. Like they asked a lot of us. I just taught, I volunteered to teach a class, and that money, all the proceeds were going to help this dance festival. I know Star Foster has done some things with some companies, but I would love to see it on a grander scale. When I was in Chicago, we used to do something called Dance for Life, and all the companies in Chicago would perform, and all the proceeds would go to the AIDS Foundation or to cancer, you know, the children's cancer, whatever that is. And I would like to do the same thing here in the city. And I think there's a great venue that's going to be built at Browns Island, this beautiful outdoor. And I'm like, why couldn't we have a huge dance festival? And maybe it's not even just the companies here in Richmond. Maybe it's DC, North Carolina, because there are a lot of small companies and everyone's always looking for a chance to perform. And if we get to do something that we love, be on stage, but also goes to a great cause, I'm like, let's do it, So when you ask me for goals, that's something that I would like to, like to spearhead or help out with something like that.
And that's something that like the Dogtown Dance Festival is awesome, but because of its brand, it's sort of like limited in terms of its scope.
Yeah.
Whereas what you said, Dance for Life.
Yeah.
That is, there's no ceiling in terms of who can be involved, how big it can be, but like, because it's associated, it would be like Virginia Rep or Firehouse doing a Firehouse Theater Festival or a Virginia Rep Theater Festival. It's like, well, okay. It's not like a Richmond Theater Festival. If it's a Richmond Theater Festival, then everyone's like, yes. Okay, great.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Because I mean, I would even love to see like Richmond Ballet, like a company at that size to perform at this, and get smaller but yet bigger companies.
Yes.
And that way the audience can also come. I mean, there's a lot of great things that would happen at this festival. It goes to a good cause. People get to perform, but also you introduce all these companies to the city of Richmond that people really wouldn't know about. So we all benefit from that, so.
Well, we've got a lot more to talk about in that regard. Yeah. We'll talk about it off mic.
Yeah, for sure.
What, this is the question that I ask all of our guests. Yeah. What advice do you have since you are so ingrained in the dance world and you have a proven success record as a professional, if a young dancer specifically is looking to be a professional in their craft, whether it is as a performer or a teacher, whatever it is, but earn a living doing their art, what would your advice be?
My biggest thing would be that you have to love what you do and you have to have passion, because this is a hard industry. And as much as my resume, as long as it is, I've had so many more no's. And when they're telling you no and you're like, it's that love for what you do. It's the work that you're doing when no one sees you to build your craft. I mean, you can look at many artists, throughout time that have painted their whole lives and they never were successful until they died, but they continue to do it. And that's what it takes. Like, you have to have drive. Because like I said, this industry isn't easy, and you're going to have a lot of obstacles that are going to make you want to quit. But that thing that, like, if you don't see yourself doing anything else but this, that's what's going to help you. That's what's going to give you that long term. That's what's going to give you a career, versus that one job that you just did. So I encourage everyone, whatever it is in dance or art, in any job, is that you have to be passionate about it. Because we all know we've done things that you get burnt out and you're like, okay, that wasn't for me. Like, I honestly say there's a little bit of an obsession when it comes to dance for me. And that's what has given me that work ethic, the things that I do now, because I was like, this is my goal and I don't want to do anything else but this. So I'm going to give my whole heart. And if I fail, then I'm going to fail greatly, but I have to do it, so, and that's what keeps me going. Even now, like that's why I still want to be creative. That's why I'm still artistic director of a company. Like, it's just because I can't see myself doing anything other than creating art. And I want to share that with it. And these are the talks that I have with my 7-year-olds that I start teaching to my college students, that when they're getting ready to go into world, I was like, do you really love what you do? And sometimes they'll say yes. And I'm like, no, let me ask you again. Do you really love what you do? And then they have to question it. And I'm like, okay, question yourself a bit, because again, then you're going to know if you're successful, because everyone has talent, but it's really your work ethic and that love that's going to send you over the edge. That's what's going to, make you have a successful career. Yeah.
And that goes across all industries. Talent is not rare. It's how you apply your talent and the discipline that's behind the talent that is rare. Yes. And that creates greatness.
Yeah. And the thing that I would add is also be kind to everybody, because I mean, I was a young, dumb kid too. I made mistakes, but I've had so many great relationships throughout that's how I found most of my work. Now my friends hire me, or teachers hire me, or you go to these institutions, because at the end of the day, people just want good employees. Like, they want someone that shows up early, does their job, does it well, loves what they're doing, gets along with everybody, and then they'll continue to hire you. And then you don't have to audition again. And that's where you really want to be, to a point where you just get a phone call like, oh, you want this job? Sure. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. The best jobs I've gotten in my life were I didn't even know they existed. And someone just called me and offered to me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And it was just because I was nice.
Yeah. And that'll continue. I mean, look at us. I feel like I mean, when everybody else, this is going to go back full circle to when we first started this conversation. Some people weren't nice, and we don't talk to those people again. But we continue this relationship, and I'm so glad that you asked me to be on your pod. But it's because, we got along really well.
Absolutely. No, and I think about you guys a lot because I'm scheming on different things that it sounds like you're in similar schemes. So that's why I say we'll talk about it. But I really appreciate what you bring to this community, and I'm glad that you have planted your roots in this community. And is there anything else that you want to shout out that you have coming up, or does Conflux have coming up?
So we're working on some shows. I think our next performance, we're looking into February 1st, maybe. Okay. And we're in talks with the Valentine. So I really wanted to do something more site-specific, a little bit more intimate. So there may be 100 people in the round and us performing there, just to give a different look, try something new. And we have some exciting things coming up. I feel like we just keep growing every year, so that's always the goal, to never go back. But I just want to say that I'm grateful for our dancers, for our board members. We have these 12 amazing women from all different ages. We are an inclusive, diverse company, and I've always wanted, from my board to my dancers to our audiences, to represent. Because I didn't see that a lot when I first moved to Richmond. I would go into these spaces and I'm like, okay, no one else looks like me. And I feel like we're doing that. And it's like this mission, this thing that we're spearheaded, but it's bigger than a company, and if we can bring more people together, under art, I think then we're doing our job. So, yeah.
Miguel Perez, thanks for coming on the pod.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. And I wish you all success on this podcast, not iPod, podcast. Yeah. Let me say that again. I wish you all the success on this podcast. You can edit that part out.